Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for another edition of Workforce Rewired, the Catapult podcast that explores a lot of different topics around the intersection of people and technology and leadership and change management and all the things that keep us up at night. And today we are joined by Joanette Freeman. Joanette is the Director of Human Resources at Mecklenburg County and also a proud Catapult board member. Thank you, Joanette. Appreciate you talking with me today.
Thank you for having me today, Cheryl. I look forward to the conversation.
Well, I know we're going to dive into a lot of really meaty topics, but our headline today is what modern leaders need that they didn't need 5 years ago. And if I just put a little context on that 5 years ago, we're talking about pre-COVID, pre-workplace changes around hybrid. We're talking about pre-artificial intelligence in a lot of ways, right? So a lot of things have changed since the 2021, as it may be. So I guess my first question for you, Jonette, might be, if you could sit down with the version of yourself from 5 years ago and give them one skill or a mindset that they might need to survive today in 2026, what would that be?
Well, that is a great question, Cheryl. And I really been thinking about that question, but it doesn't take a lot of thought because of what is happening in our world today. And when, as a leader, I think I would have told myself that you've got to be able to lead successfully through ambiguity.
Mm.
There are things change on a dime. They change quickly, and we may not even fully understand the change. But in the midst of that, you've got to be comfortable being uncomfortable, and being able to lead when you don't have. I think prior to 5 years ago, there were more scripted paths, right? That's not true now. So we are really in a time where we're truly building the plane as we fly it. So,
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Jonette. And I think about the evolving profession of HR in particular, right? We've gone
yes.
from compliance oriented, where we have
Hmm.
rules and black and white policies, to, I always say to our team, sometimes you got to live in the gray space.
Yes. Oh, yeah. The gray space, get comfortable in the gray space. I
Yes.
would even say yes. Because, and that's true. We're not as heavily compliance driven, even though we still have to make sure we are in compliance. We have so many other things that have been introduced to the workplace. The mental health crisis, culture work, the value, employees wanting to feel seen, heard, and valued. And that really being a linchpin for employees to continue with your organization. There are just different things we have to consider now that we have not always had to consider. So,
Yeah. Well, I love your framing of, being comfortable with the uncomfortable and living in ambiguity. And it takes me to kind of thinking about executives, and you're in an executive role for the county. And there's lots of leadership books out there, and we've all read a lot of those, but a lot of the playbooks were written in a different time. And
mhm.
so, what have you had to actively unlearn? And what's something that's you had to let go that maybe worked in the past?
Well, I would say that one of the things that really comes to mind is letting go of control, right? So when I think back a few years ago in some of my previous positions, being in a leadership role, things were very much hierarchical, and decisions were made as you go up the chain of the hierarchy. Now, decision making in today's world to me is flattened quite a bit, where we are now, even though the hierarchy still exists, the decision making is more collaborative. So you're talking to people on your team, you're asking their thoughts, their opinions, how we're looking at data. But definitely, I would say for me, I have had to unlearn. I think I'm collaborative by nature anyway. So it wasn't a difficult behavior to change. But to me, it has been really critical that it did change because that's just not the times where the workplace has changed.
Yeah, yeah. And employees want to be engaged and
They want to be
inspired at
engaged.
all levels.
Yes.
So that's a
Yes.
great one. The
Hmm.
other thing that I always think about that has changed kind of in today's day and age is the speed of change, right? It
Mm,
used to be, and you said that in your opening comment, sometimes you could expect and you could predict how fast
right.
things might go. And
Yes.
now it just feels like we're on like put your car in permanent change mode and like it's constant change. And so has that changed how you guys think about the talent that you're hiring or you're promoting with inside the organization?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And what I would say to that is, and looking at this from an HR lens, there are HR certifications, there's information you need to know and understand as an HR professional. But because of the speed of change, there are other skill sets that we need outside of just HR. For example, I feel like we live in a project management space these days, right? So hiring someone, there is always a project in HR, whether it's updating technology or changing a policy. There's always work around that. So no, having someone with project management skills has been a great asset to our team. Also, crisis management, someone that knows how to navigate situations in a crisis, put a plan together, and effectively navigate through crisis management is something that we also see as a valued skill in HR. And then, probably finally, for me, the third one is someone that has change management.
Mm.
We live in a world of change. Changes moving constantly, to the point that if if some of our employees don't have that skill coming in, we are upskilling them, taking them through some training to be able to be change agents for the organization, because that's the dynamic of today's workplace. So
Yeah, yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think you really outlined a lot of important skills. The project management, we're taking our entire leadership team through project management training, right?
mhm.
Because it's such an essential skill if you're going to lead through people and
Yes.
initiatives for organizations. Really, really important. And the last one you mentioned around change management, kind of navigating that. It makes me think about how we make decisions. And,
Hmm.
you said earlier that there's a lot of data that we didn't have 5 years ago. But there's also a lot more noise in the system of that data, and you got to sift through what's real and what's
Yes.
not.
Yes.
And so, can you tell us like how your decision making is changing compared to previously?
Yes, sure. So for us, our decision making has changed pretty substantially because we are leaning so much more on data. To the point that now in our HR department, we have a business office that actually focuses on analytics for HR. So we need the data for our bit to drive our benefits, to tell us about our performance metrics. We need the data to look at like our total rewards, how are employees responding to what the current offerings are in the organization. So it has become habitual for us now, as we're putting together presentations and sharing information with our senior leadership, our executive team with the county. We always go in with data, because data informed decisions, the data doesn't lie, right? The data tells us exactly what's happening in the organization, and it gives us a really clear lens on how to make decisions, even in an HR capacity. I know some people who are still getting up to speed, some of the HR colleagues that are still getting up to speed with data. And my message is, hey, you got to get your data. You got to make sure you have someone that is responsible for data in your department, because it truly helps you in governing decisions for the enterprise. So,
Yeah. And with that same, access to data, it brings more transparency around
yes,
accountability,
I
right?
have 100%.
So what
Yes.
have you seen there?
So, and it's interesting you use that word accountability, because we're actually going through a culture transformation in Mecklenburg County. And one of the values for us is accountability. And some of the discussion that came up around that in some of our huddles has been the data will help us to hold our employees accountable, not in a bad way, but we're all here to do a job, and we have to be accountable for what we have been hired to do. So when we go and pull some of our metrics, some of our data, it'll tell the story. And now how we use it, we got to make sure that we are, operating in our caring culture, but we do want to hold employees accountable. And as leaders, we want to be held accountable as well.
Yeah. And that's a real, fundamental shift, right? We went
Mhm.
from some days post-COVID where employees were in the driver's seat, right? They were the ones that could demand different jobs and higher salaries and everything else. And it sounds like the pendulum's kind of coming back a little bit. And
Mhm.
employers are now in the driver's seat. But, I think that relationship between employers and employees around expectations and accountability and all those things really impacts how we lead and how we retain our talent.
No, I would agree with that 100%. Because because the dynamics truly, I mean, of today's workplace, to me, is shifting a little bit. We see the shift in the county from right after COVID. We saw a lot of employees kind of, they were the drivers, right? But in today's economy, I feel like it's putting the organization somewhat back in the driver's seat. But one of the things I continue to try to echo here in Mecklenburg County, even though we do see that shift taking place, we still want to make sure that as leaders, we are valuing our employees and we're doing as much as we possibly can to ensure that they feel valued, because who knows, with the changing environment that we have, that pendulum can swing again, and we're back into employees kind of dictating what happens in the workplace. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And you talked about it, taking care of your employees, and you mentioned, mental health being on the
Yes.
radar of a lot of HR leaders. It's hard now, being a leader in a department or in an organization, and
Mhm.
taking time to care for yourself. So let me, ask you if you figured out any magic for, keeping some balance in your own life.
Well, I would say one of the things I'm trying to do to keep balance in my own life is in our department, I am working to cultivate instead of us just thinking of retaining employees, I want to build relationships with our team. So moving from retention to relationship. And in doing so, that in that relationship, it helps me to kind of share more information with the team, be available for learning opportunities from team members, provide mentorship for the team. And in doing that, it provides self care for me because I'm able to offload some things to other members of the team to give them a learning experience, provide an opportunity of growth for them. Because at some point I'll be moving on.
Yeah.
But I want Mecklenburg County to be strong and I want HR to be strong. So information sharing is a big way for me to take care of myself because I'm not always the point person for a decision or for information. And then outside of that, of course, making sure you take time off and promoting that on our team. I tell the team, I'm looking at balance. I'll look at your vacation. Why do you have so much vacation? Take some time off. It's really okay. We will be here tomorrow. We will keep things moving. Take time, unplug, so that when you come back, you can be more productive. And not only just be productive, but it's about sustaining too. So we don't want people burning the candle at both ends, but making sure they take care of themselves. And it's so funny. An employee just asked me, "So when are you going to take vacation?" I said, "I have one coming up." So
Okay, that's good. That's good.
yeah.
Well, let me give you the crystal ball. We've
Okay.
talked a lot about what happened 5 years ago and what's kind of the reality of today's leaders and HR professionals. If I ask you 5 years from now, do you think there might be, a defining capability that separates those who have thrived through this period and those who didn't, and how you develop that?
Well, I would say that adaptability is front and center. Being able to be agile and adapt quickly to the change that's happening in the environment or in your workplace is a huge one. I also think emotional intelligence is a big one. Um, you have to be emotionally intelligent, understand the needs of your employees, how to connect with them. Um, that is a huge thing, and and that kind of takes me back to the culture piece again. Really understanding the employees and the needs of the employees, being willing to hire, really is kind of a recap of what you asked earlier, about being able to hire with some different skills in HR. Project management, just instead of someone that's just on a pure HR track. So being able to be intuitive enough to know what your organization needs, that you're getting the right skills and you're putting them in the right seats in the organization, because a lot of times what we find is that we have skill gaps because we've hired to a specific skill set, and we need to broaden that some to ensure that we are successful in the future. So, and then I think the last one is strategic thinking under pressure. We live in live and work in dynamic environments, right? So you got to be able to think quick. You got to be able to think clearly under pressure, and being able to develop that muscle to me is a huge. It'll be a huge plus for you in the future, today and in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What great advice coming from a seasoned leader, Joanette Freeman, who's the Director of Human Resources at Mecklenburg County. Joanette, I could keep talking to you all day, so we'll have you come back on for another episode, but we'll
Okay.
wrap this one up and say, thanks for sharing your insights for us on leadership, past, present, and future. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you so much for the time today. It's been great talking to you, and I could talk HR all day too. So
So more to come. Tune in
more to
next
come.
time on our next episode of Workforce Rewired.
All right. Thank
Thank
you.
you.